Hello, I'm Orion Evans, and today we're going to be exploring the lymphatic system, looking at what it does in our bodies and how we can work to help support it. The lymphatic system is a really vital but often overlooked part of how we function and how we maintain our health. So I look forward to sharing some things with you today. During this class, we're going to learn a little bit about the lymphatics, about what they do to keep us healthy, and explore some self-care techniques. Some techniques to help us balance our autonomic nervous system, which is to do with how we regulate stress and also how all our organs function in our body. We're going to look a little bit at relaxing the diaphragm, which is very much, of course, to do with breathing, but also very much to do with the lymphatics. We're going to look at how to move the lymphatics throughout our body, how to connect with breathing, and perhaps connect with some deeper levels of healing. So let's start with what are the lymphatics? Well, the lymphatics are part of the system called the circulatory system, and the circulatory system is to do with circulation, to do with supply and drainage in our body. And if you think about, say, the road system, you have big highways and then you have exits off those highways to big roads, and then those roads go to smaller roads, and maybe you end up on a little dirt road like the one I live on, but the roads go to all the houses. And then they lead away from all the houses. So in the circulatory system, you have vessels, tubes, if you like, that go to all the cells in the body and that drain away from all the cells in the body. The arteries are, if you like, the supply side of this. They supply stuff to all the cells and tissues in our body: oxygen, nutrients, immune system cells. And the veins bring back stuff away from the cells back to the heart. But what happens is that in the tissues, those vessels, like a little dirt road, they become very small and the walls become very thin and kind of leaky. So that stuff, oxygen and glucose and whatever else your body needs, leaks out of the vessels into the spaces around the cells, and not everything makes it back into the venous system. And for that, the lymphatic system is there to kind of take up the slack and bring back whatever's left. And the lymphatics are really everywhere in our bodies. And we're going to look at a few pictures to give you some ideas. Here we have a picture of what it looks like in the tissues. You have a whole bunch of cells. In between the cells, you have some space. That space is actually filled with some fluid and some molecules, and it's kind of like a gel in there. You have arteries bringing supplies, the red side of the diagram, and leaking out into those tissue spaces. And then you have the venous system, the blue vessels, that collect the fluid and the waste and take it away. And as we've talked about, not everything gets back into the venous system, and then you have the lymph to take up the slack, so to speak. You can see those are the green vessels. You can see that they begin as blind-ended little vessels in the tissues, and they collect the fluid and the other materials, and they start to drain away from the spaces, and those capillaries are going to start to get bigger and bigger into vessels and move up towards the heart. And here's just a nice picture to show you that in fact the lymphatics are indeed everywhere in your body, in all the spaces in the tissues, draining all your cells, whether it's your brain or your hand or your heart. And everything in the lymph moves from those tiny tissue spaces to bigger and bigger vessels, and then moves up to the heart and eventually joins up with the venous system to return fluids to the circulatory system. Now we have a sense of what the lymphatics look like in the tissues and also what they look like in the whole body and how they're present in our entire body. Let's talk about what they do. They do three main things. The first thing is that they keep the fluids in balance. They collect all that extra fluid, proteins, waste, electrolytes, some nutrients from all our tissues, and they carry that up towards the heart, and right near the heart, the lymphatic vessels dump into the veins, and then the veins continue onto the heart, and all that extra fluid is returned to the circulatory system. So without good lymphatics, you can get inflammation, you can get boggy tissues, people who are on bed rest and start to swell up, that's because their lymphatics really aren't working very well. So keeps our fluids in balance. The second thing it does is it supports healing. It does this in a couple of different ways. It reduces inflammation. So if you sprain your ankle and it swells, it'll help to drain that. If you cut yourself and you get a little infection and you get some swelling underneath, it'll help to drain that. If in your lungs you have these millions of little balloons that are filled with air, and if there's fluid in some of those, the lymphatics help to clear the fluids out of the air spaces. So it reduces inflammation, but it also has a really cool surveillance system for the immune system. This is a kind of combination of a water filter, like your Brita water filter that you have on your countertop, and your camera security system. So it does that through the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes you probably have heard of, or you've seen, or you can feel them sometimes when they swell. They're like a filter system. The foreign stuff is carried through the lymph and brought to the lymph nodes, and in the lymph nodes there are immune system cells, and these immune cells check out what's in your lymph and decide whether to mount an immune response. The final thing that it does fluids imbalance, it supports our healing, and it also has a role in nutrition. When you digest your food, you have a digestive tract, you have a small intestine that breaks down the food, and then it goes into the bloodstream. But some of the food that you digest is too big to make it into the bloodstream, and guess where it goes? The lymphatics. That's particularly true of some fats. So brought to the lymphatic system, and then because the lymphatic system returns to the heart and the circulatory system, it makes those nutrients make their way around to all the tissues. So keeps our fluids in balance, supports our healing, and important in nutrition. The other thing to know about the lymphatics is it really is a one-way system. So we saw that picture where it starts in the spaces between the cells. These little, small, very delicate tubes, tiny, they're kind of spongy, and they meet up with other little tiny vessels, and they get a little bigger, and they move towards the heart. They go through the lymph nodes to be kind of filtered and cleaned out, and then up here, just kind of behind your collarbones, the lymphatics join up with the venous system, and then the venous system drains into your heart. So let's talk about how the lymph moves. When you think about your arteries, you can feel your artery. Often you can, if you take your pulse, you're feeling the artery, and the artery has big, strong muscles, and those muscles pump the blood through the arteries. And when you look at your veins, and you can see your veins in your wrist or in your legs, so those blue things, they're thinner than the arteries. You don't have a big strong pulse, but they still have a fair bit of muscle, and they still have a pumping action. The lymphatics don't have a lot of muscles. Those tubes have some muscles, and they have some nervous system control that says time to compress, but it's not very much. They're thin walls, they're easily squished. What they do have is one-way valves, so they have a valve in the tube, and if you if the fluid goes up through a section of the lymphatics, that valve will close, so you don't get a lot of backflow, and it keeps moving in the right direction. But basically, the lymphatics rely on other things to move the lymph through the vessels. And primarily that gets done from movement. Every time you move around, every time you exercise, every time you walk, you're moving the lymphatic vessels. The lymph, I should say, through the lymphatic vessels. Every time you breathe, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but every time you breathe, you're moving a big chunk of lymph. Every time your digestive tube moves food along, that action called peristalsis, where the stuff in the digestive tube is squeezed along, that's a big mover of the lymph. So we want to keep an eye on moving the lymph, and all your physical motion does move the lymph, but when we do the exercises, those are exercises that are designed specifically to target the lymphatics, to target this very kind of sensitive, delicate motion. Here is a picture of the lymph node. As we talked about, the lymph node works a bit like a water filtration system. The lymph is brought to the node through the afferent vessels. Afferent just means it comes to the node, and then the lymph, that fluid, starts to trickle down through the layers of the node towards the bottom, and it leaves via the efferent lymphatic vessel. The efferent just means going away from. And while it's in the lymph node, those filter areas are lined with immune system cells. So those cells get to look at whatever's in the lymph and say, yeah, that bit of something is fine. No, this is a virus or a bacteria, and we're going to mount an immune response. Here's a picture of the thoracic duct, and basically what you're looking at here is the thoracic, the chest area spine, and that green tube that's running up the front of it is the thoracic duct. It starts just below the diaphragm at the cisterna chyli, and it moves up the front of your spine and then joins up with the venous system, which we can see a little detail of here. Those green vessels joining up to the big blue veins, and those veins are right before they enter into the heart. That big red vessel you see is the aorta going down to supply your body with blood. So there you have arterial supply, venous and lymphatic drainage. Let's talk about your diaphragm. I'm sure you've heard of your diaphragm, and you may know that it's a big muscle. It's kind of a sheet that separates the top of your body from whatever is underneath. So on the top of it is your heart and your lungs and your arms and your throat and your head and your neck. And underneath is a whole lot of organs, your stomach, your liver, your spleen, your intestines, your legs, your pelvic organs below the diaphragm. And there's some holes in this sheet, if you like, so that things can get through, so that the aorta can get through to supply blood, and your esophagus gets through to meet your stomach. The other thing about it is it's a sheet, but it's not flat. It's kind of got a dome shape to it. And it attaches to the rib cage that's in your front of your rib cage and also the back. So it has slips into the insides of your rib cage, then it comes up in this dome, and it comes all the way in the back to attach. So in terms of our work with the lymphatics, there's a couple of things to mention. One is that at the back of the diaphragm, kind of right in front of the top of the lumbar spine, the top of your low back spine, is an area called cisterna chyli, and that's basically a little collecting area. It's a cistern that collects lymph. Um, and that collects all the lymph from the lower part of your body, and then it pumps from there. The lymph gets pumped into this bigger lymph vessel called the thoracic duct. That thoracic duct comes up in front of your spine and comes up to this collarbone area, actually this particularly on the left hand side, and meets up with the veins there and brings the fluid back to the heart. So you have this cisterna chyli collecting lymph from the bottom of your body, basically. And the other thing is that the diaphragm is a muscle, but the underneath side of it, if you have the dome, the underneath of it is kind of like a sponge. And in that spongy area are little lakes. They're called lacuna, which just means lakes. And if you've ever seen a sea sponge, you probably know how it's all kind of bobbly with these little areas, little holes, if you like. And when you put the sponge in water, it gets filled with water, and those little lake areas get filled, and when you squeeze it, all the water comes out. And that's basically what happens in your body. When you breathe in, those lakes, that sponge gets squeezed, and all that lymphatic fluid ends up in the thoracic duct to get up to the heart. We're also going to see some pictures, but basically on this dome, above it you have your heart and your lungs, and below it you have liver, spleen, a whole lot of stuff. And every time that diaphragm kind of moves like this, kind of goes down and up, all the organs sitting on top and below get a little, like a little mini massage. They get squeezed and pumped a little bit. So we're going to show you a few pictures. So I wanted to show you a few pictures of the diaphragm, which is a kind of hard muscle to get a clear picture of in your mind. As I said, it's a dome that separates the top of your body from the bottom. It's higher in the front than in the back, and I think you can see that really well on this slide, that it's coming up under the ribs in the front and then going all the way back into the front of the lumbar vertebra at the back. This is a nice picture of the diaphragm, looking at it from underneath, so to speak, and you can see how there's lots of fibers going in all kinds of different directions to form this kind of mesh that keeps the two areas separate. You can also see that there are a few holes so things can get through, like your esophagus and your aorta and the thoracic duct that we're talking about. And the diaphragm, as we've talked about, has this amazing arrangement with the organs of the body. So on top of the diaphragm, sitting right on top of it, is the heart and the lungs. And this picture, the lungs are kind of pulled apart a little bit so you can see the whole of the heart. But you can see how every time that diaphragm moves, it's going to give a little pump to the heart and lungs, a little massage. And here, this messy picture is of what's happening underneath. So at the very top, you have this thin kind of sheet of muscle called the diaphragm. And underneath it, that big reddish thing is your liver, and the brown tube is your gallbladder. And then over on the other side, you have your stomach and your spleen. And again, when the diaphragm moves, those organs get a little bit of motion. Under here, I wanted to put this in because this is a picture of your adrenal glands. This is at the very back, if you can picture the back of your diaphragm where it's attaching in to your spine and to the ribs of the back. Underneath that, you have the kidneys, which you can see pretty clearly. And on top of the kidneys are those little kind of squishy, triangular looking organs, and those are your adrenal glands. The adrenals are really important to how we deal with stress. So when you're working with your diaphragm, when you're working with breathing, you're also supporting your autonomic nervous system and your adrenal glands. Now that we have some idea of what the lymphatics are and how they work in our bodies, let's talk about how we can do some work to support lymphatic function. And that comes into the bigger picture of how we support health in our bodies. People talk about our body as like a temple. And to me, what that means is that we treat it with a certain kind of love and respect and kindness. And um, we work with it so that it can really access its own healing capacity to a greater extent. Okay. And the lymphatics in my work, um, over the last 35 years, it's really become apparent to me that the lymphatics are really an important part of our own ability to maintain our health. They're this very delicate, spongy kinds of tubes, and you want to treat those um, with a kind of tenderness. Okay, so whereas any movement, a big run or anything that you do is going to actually move the lymph, in these exercises we're going to do very small and gentle movements that are more specific, if you like, for lymphatic movement, so that we're matching and synchronizing and becoming part of that delicate lymphatic system. Okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to do the class in 3 parts. The first is a short meditation, if you like, a guided contemplation exercise, just to let us settle in, to let our minds get calm, to let our stress get a little less, to feel more relaxed, to get that autonomic nervous system a little more balanced, that flight, fright, prepared for emergency kind of system calm down, so that our what we call our vegetative functions, our digestion, our respiration, our lymphatics, they can all be more functional. So a little guided meditation. Then I'm going to take you through a series of about 7 or 8 different moves, exercises, if you like, specifically designed to stimulate and access the lymphatics. And I've designed them in a particular order to open up certain things in a certain order for effectiveness. But when you're doing this yourself, you can run through the whole series, or you can just take a couple of minutes in your day and do 1 or 2 of them that you like. They're designed to, as I said, be really matching the lymphatics. You don't want to do them for a long time. More is not better. You don't want to do them harder, like pushing hard doesn't get the lymphatics moving more. Okay? So you can pick and choose and take a few of them and do them in the course of your day if you like. After we've done these, I'm going to do another meditative exercise and bring you really into a deeper sense of rest. When the lymphatics are moving well, your body feels kind of softer and your system can really become more at rest. And after we finish that final exercise, that final contemplative time, I would suggest, if you have the time in your life, to finish with our work together, but then continue to rest. Maybe go and lie down or sit quietly for 10 or 15 minutes, so that the treatment that you do on yourselves will be effective. And we're going to finish with one last slide before we get going. Before we begin our work with the lymphatics, I thought I'd end with a quote from Andrew Taylor Still, who was the founder of osteopathy. He was a Midwestern doctor at the turn of the 20th century. And we've been talking about the structure of the lymphatics being these soft vessels, and how we have to approach our work with the lymphatics with some kindness. And Andrew Taylor still said, it behooves us to handle the lymphatics with wisdom and tenderness. So let's start doing some work with the lymphatics now. Let's begin with a couple of minutes to just get quiet. And I'd like you to do this sitting on a chair or a stool, or you can do it standing. And you can do it with your eyes closed, or if you have a window to look out of, it can be nice to look at the view while you do this. In any case, take a second to come into yourself and begin with getting a sense of your feet on the floor and allowing them to be supported by the ground beneath them. Sense of grounding, a sense of being connected to the earth, and your feet can relax into that. And then get a sense of the room that you're in, of the space around you. Maybe even a sense of who else is in your house or around in your community. So your feet are on the floor, your shoulders are a little relaxed, your head is relaxed, your hands are soft. And then get a sense outside of this room that you're in, a sense of the world around you, a sense of nature, of the mountains or the ocean or the desert, of the wind, of the rain, of the wild animals, the natural world around you. And then you get a sense of the breath. We're not looking for deep breaths. We're not looking for belly breaths. We're not looking to count or change or control our breath. Just to notice it and to let it be quiet. It's quiet in and quiet out. A simple kind of breath. So we spend a minute with that sense of the natural world around us, a sense of our own being grounded by the earth, a sense of our own breath being quiet. We begin to rest. Okay, we're going to start with opening up some channels. And if you've ever had a clogged up pipe, you know you can't really get that pipe flowing again until you've released the clog at the end. And as we know, all the lymphatics in our body drain back into the venous system near the heart, and most of that happens on the left side in the thoracic duct. Okay, and that drains the thoracic duct, which you've seen a picture of, drains all of our lower body and the whole left side of our upper body as well. And so let's do a little work to open that up at the junction where it meets up with the venous system. And to do that, I want you to come onto your breastbone, it's called the sternum, that bone in the middle of your chest. And I want you to feel where the collarbone ends at that breastbone, and then go down just a little bit, and then come back out again to the left side, just under the collarbone. You're in that area of the top of the rib cage. Okay, I'm going to get a little closer so you can see kind of right there where I'm pressing around there. It may feel a little tender. We're going to do a few different little movements to open that area up, and you can try out all of them and see which ones you like better, or do a little of each. And when you're doing this at home, some days certain of these little movements may feel better than others. The first one is to just vibrate. So you're taking your fingers and you're putting them on your body, and then you're moving it in little circles. So I'll show you kind of close up. There we go. Just a little vibration. The second one is a little pumping. And again, with those same kind of two fingers, you're push and rebound. Push, it's kind of like bouncing a ball that you push down and come back up. Push and come back up. So you're not kind of trying to really force it or move it, just putting a little pumping motion in there. So pump, 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 pump. I'm doing this with my right hand on the left side of my body. And the other way to do it is to just tap gently. You're not hitting real hard, you're just tapping gently in that area. And that's going to open up that end of the lymphatics. Okay, we're going to start at the end. And we just do that for a few minutes. It may be a little tender, it may feel like nothing is happening, and you may be tempted to tap it a little harder. That won't work. It's better to just do it a little gently and just a little patiently. You need to have some patience when you're working with the lymphatics. Okay. And then you'll start to feel, it'll start to feel a little softer. And then, now we're going to do a similar kind of motion on the right side. The right lymphatic duct also enters into the right side of the venous system right before it enters the heart. The thoracic duct carries most of the lymph, but the right lymphatic duct does carry lymph from the right side of the head and the throat and the lungs, so it has its own importance. So again, you're on the right side now, and you can do those little motions, little vibration. If you're happier, if you're very right-handed and you want to just use your right hand, you can come in that way. And a little bit of tapping or a little bit of pumping. I might want to pump this way and give you a better view. Good. Let's just take a minute to do that. And then let your hands drop and just take a few little breaths and see if you can feel a difference in your breathing. Okay, now we're going to move on. Okay, for our next exercise, we're going to open up the back of the diaphragm. And if you remember from those pictures, right in front of the back of the diaphragm, basically, is those adrenal glands. So, and also in the back there is cisterna chyli, the bottom end, if you like, of the thoracic duct. So we've opened up the top of the thoracic duct, and now we're going to open up the bottom of the thoracic duct. So what you want to do is make little fists in your hands, and you're going to put those fists against your back. Okay, the top of your low back, the bottom of the lower ribs. If you have shoulder problems and you can't do this, you can just spread your hands and get your thumbs around the back area. Okay, so I'm going to turn around and try and show that to you. Move my camera a little bit and just put my hands in the back here. And if your shoulders aren't up for that and that's a hard position, then you can just kind of hold the sides with your thumbs wrapping around the back. So then take just a minute to get comfortable. Make sure your legs are relaxed on the ground. And then you're going to push those wrists into your back and towards the front of your body. Push them very gently. Remember, the movement that we do in these exercises is gentle and small. But you can put a nice bit of support in there, and you can even lean back a little bit over your hands. And we basically just hold them there and giving the support to the bottom of your rib cage and the back of the diaphragm where the muscles are attaching in there allows it to relax. And you just spend a little minute doing that. Just letting your breath be nice and soft and moving into that area. And maybe you lean a little more or you push a little more forward with your hands. You're going to feel like getting a little more relaxed under your hands. Okay, and then slowly release. So, we've released the back of the diaphragm, and if you take a couple of breaths, you're going to feel that your diaphragm and your rib cage is moving a little easier, but you may still be feeling how tight it is around the sides and in the front with all the sitting that people are doing at the moment, or just in general in their lives, sitting in front of the desks at work. Those areas can get really tight. So we're going to start by opening up the sides. We opened up the back, now we're going to open up the sides. And basically what you want to do is reach one arm across. So I have my left arm reaching to the right side, and then I put my other hand, my right hand on top, and I'm going to bend into that area. And this is not an exercise class. This is not a yoga class. It is not about how far you can bend. It's about bending just enough to engage the tissues. So if I'm looking at my diaphragm and I go like this, I've missed it, okay? And if I go just a tiny bit, I haven't quite got it. So it's a matter of going just a little bit and you pushing your hands in a little bit to engage the tissues under the rib cage. So we breathe in, and when we breathe out, we just side bend a little bit, and then we hold it. And we take some breaths into that area. Good. And maybe on another out breath, you might go a little bit further, but not much. And then on an in-breath, just slowly straighten up again. Okay, let's do the other side. So I take my right hand, bring it across, put it on the side, put my left hand on top of it for support. Okay, and again, I'm not trying to see how far I can bend, but just enough to engage my diaphragm. Okay, so breathe, take a few breaths in, and on an out breath, just push a little bit in and fold over your hands. So your hands are kind of like a support and you're folding over. And take a few breaths. So your body's relaxing and your hands are giving it the support to do that. And maybe you can bend a little bit more, just engaging the tissues. Okay, and then slowly sit up. Okay, now that should feel pretty good, but you probably still feel some tightness under this top of the diaphragm where it attaches in the front behind your sternum and those ribs. So we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to put your two hands support each other and your body kind of folds over it, okay? So we're going to be bending forward, but it's not like a forward bend or trying to touch your toes. You're just taking the area above your hand and folding it, slouching it forward a little bit. And while you do that, your hands, which are going to start against your body, kind of fold underneath a little bit. So it's kind of like a folding in. You can do this both one hand on each side and folding, but it's a little easier to do one side at a time. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll start on this right side. I put my left hand there on the front. I put my right hand on top, okay? And try and get your left hand, your inside hand, if you like, the part touching the body, kind of more relaxed and soft, and the outside hand doing the work. And again, it's going to kind of scoop under the diaphragm, under your rib cage, okay? So you breathe in and out and in, and when you breathe out, you just kind of fold over a little bit. This might feel quite uncomfortable. Don't try and push it. Just go to the point where you stop, and it may feel like you've done nothing at all, but just stay there and breathe. And then after a few breaths, you may find that you can fold a little bit more, okay? And just hold it. The idea is not to see how far you can go. The idea is to just give a little bit of support for your diaphragm so it can release. Okay, and then come up again. So in this work, we're not trying to stretch the diaphragm or push against the diaphragm. We're almost trying to spring it a little bit, compress it a little bit so it has a little bit of ease. And then your diaphragm can go, oh, maybe I don't have to work so hard. And it releases, okay? So let's do the other side, on the left side. And you're trying to get kind of underneath here. So one hand kind of quiet, the other active, and then I kind of lean over it. Just slouching over your hands. And up. Okay, so we've opened up the diaphragm, the back and the sides and the front of the diaphragm. And now it's time to open up that top of the rib cage a little more and help that lymphatic movement through there. So let's begin. Take your hands and find, they can meet to begin with, and find that breastbone underneath, and then spread out a little bit so it's under the ribs. Okay, so we're going to do 3 different movements kind of in a row, and I'll show them to you, and then we'll do them in a cycle. So the first one is that you find that spot, those ribs, and you just breathe in, and as you breathe in, you kind of bring your shoulders back and the front of the rib cage spreads. So your elbows are kind of up like wings, and they spread, okay? And then the second one, you reach over to kind of your armpit area. There's a big muscle there called the pectoralis major. There's a lot of lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, in there. And so there's a lot of lymphatic drainage, and areas in our body which are kind of tight, and the lymph can get stuck. So we want to open up those lymph nodes. So you kind of take your hand, and you put it just under your armpit, if you like. And as you breathe in, you kind of pull it up and over a little bit. Okay, and then we do the other side, up and over a little bit. Okay, so let's do that. 3 movements. First of all, breathe in and pull your arms back, open up, and then over to one side and up and in towards your body and relax. And on the other side, up and in towards your body. Relax, and then spread, and then up and in, Okay, let's do that a couple more times. Spread and up and in and up and in. And one more time. Spread and up and in and up and in. Good. Great. Now let's do what I call waking up the lymphatics. So it's kind of like knocking on the door. Hello, is anybody home? We're going to do that tapping. We did that little tapping over the lymphatic ducts, and now we're going to do it over the whole chest. You can use your kind of whole hands if you want. You can use just the 2 fingers and just one hand, but let's try and kind of remember the lymphatics are everywhere. You can even, if you can do it on your arms, you can do it on your legs, but let's certainly want to keep your chest and your heart lymphatics nice and open. You can do up into your throat a little bit. That's really helpful for people. Okay, and I'm going to move the camera so you can kind of see coming down. You can stretch around the back if you like, and up the sides. So, hello, wake up, wake up, wake up. Hello, and remember, tapping hard isn't going to make it go any faster or be any more effective. So nice and gentle and playful with this. Remember, treat the lymphatics with tenderness. Okay. And take a minute now and just let yourself breathe. And by now you should be feeling a little like you have a wider expansion of the breathing. Remember, every time you breathe, you move those lymphatics. Okay, now we're going to do what I call the lymphatic wobble, which is basically shaking your body really gently to match the tone of those delicate vessels and really get them happy to move. Okay, you're not trying to force them, you want them to be engaged in this. Okay, so I'm going to move the camera so you can see my feet. We're going to start with feet on the ground, ankles soft, and wobbling a little bit in your knees and ankles. So let me see if I can get the camera kind of that way. Okay, so my feet are on the ground. This is not lifting your heels. This is sinking your knees, and it's not bending. You're not doing squats. You're just softening those knees a little bit and softening those ankles. People's ankles tend to be really, really tight. And just very gently. If you have a kind of mini tramp or rebounder, this is really nice to do on one of those. If you are doing it on that, it's not bouncing. You're not leaving that trampoline surface. You're leaving your feet on the ground or on the mini tramp and just bouncing a little bit. And then after you do that a little while, you can start to kind of just let your pelvis get in the act and soften. Okay, I'm going to move the camera a little bit. And now you have that same wobble, and the pelvis is soft, and now let your arms drop, and you just kind of shake a little bit. If you don't have time to do the whole series, just do this. Just if you get up in the morning and you're feeling a little funky, or if it's the afternoon and your system's kind of sluggish, just do a little bit of shaking, a little wobble, and remember that the lymphatics are delicate, and you want to be kind to your body, kind to the lymphatics, so that there's a certain kind of flow, a certain kind of softness. And usually it may feel like nothing's happening. Some days this might be really easy. Some days you're like, yeah, whatever, nothing's happening. And the tendency is to try and move it more. But in fact, moving it, most people that I work with are moving too much rather than too little. So in fact, you want to slow it down just a little bit. And it may take 10 seconds or it may take 2 minutes, but eventually you're going to start to feel almost like a warmth coming in your body. And so I'm starting to feel that, and maybe a little softness. So, and after that happens, after it starts to soften up, you stay with it a little while, but not forever. You can just do it for a couple of minutes, because once you've woken up the lymphatics, once you've said, hey, let's try and get some motion, it'll take it from there. Anything you do will help it. But if the lymphatics are tight, the thoracic duct is clogged up, if your cisterna chyli is clogged up, if your diaphragm's not moving, you can go for a 10-mile run and you won't move the lymphatics. And I see that in my work. I treat athletes who are really not moving the lymphatics because the channels aren't open. So we do this, and it really then helps. And if you're feeling unwell, this can be really nice. You don't want to overdo it, but it can be nice. Okay, now just take a minute to just feel that breath in and out of your hands. Just nice and quiet. And even though we're not working on, I'm not interested in deep breaths, you're going to feel more freedom. You're going to feel more opening in the rib cage as you open. And one thing I want to say is that if you're unwell, this is really helpful, but it's also important to not overdo it. I've been working with some people over video who have symptoms of COVID, and these techniques are really helpful, but there's a fine line between opening up and getting the flow going and exhausting your body. So just feel your own system. Some days you just might be really tired and you don't want to do very much, but do a little bit and you'll feel better. Other days you're feeling kind of clogged up, and you work with it for a while and it feels like, yes, I'm moving. So that's the exercise series. You can do the whole series. You can do just little parts of it, but play with it and enjoy it. And now we're going to do a little meditation to finish up. And after the meditation, I would highly recommend just lying down or sitting quietly, or maybe taking a really gentle walk, but spending a little bit of quiet time to allow this treatment that you've done on yourself to integrate and work through as deeply as possible. Thank you very much. Now that we've done our work on the lymphatics, moved our bodies around a little bit, moved our lymph around, let's take another few minutes to become quiet and to let our bodies balance and integrate the work that we've done. We've given it some information, and now it takes a little bit of time to integrate that information into our bodies and to support that process of healing which we've begun. So let's begin as we did with the first meditation, to just sit or stand quietly with our feet on the ground, supported by the earth. And a sense of the natural world around you that supports you and heals. And to sense the breath. The breath is quiet. You're not trying to control it or have it be at a certain rhythm or even watch it too closely. Okay, it's simple, like a baby. Like a baby sleeping, breathes with a quiet in and a quiet out. Quiet in through the nose, quiet out through the nose. Your feet are on the floor. You can notice if your shoulders are holding tension and just let them drop. You can notice if your hands are soft. And you have a sense of nature and a sense of a healing that comes from outside of us. We have this amazing human body with anatomy and physiology, structure and function, and as part of that, we have many, many ways to heal. But we also have support for that healing from something mysterious. So our breath becomes quiet. You may get a sense of the space around you, like a bubble or a field that is around your body, that your body doesn't end, in fact, at your skin, but that you sit in this bubble or this egg. Like a fetus or an embryo sits in the fluid of the womb and is held and supported and floating in that fluid. So you are held in that bubble, in that egg, held by the greater mystery of the natural world. Your breath becomes even more quiet, perhaps almost imperceptible. You get a sense of stillness around you, a sense of stillness inside, and a sense of being transparent to that stillness, to that deeper healing. And perhaps a sense that your own breath is connected to a deeper breath around you. Great osteopath William Sutherland talked about the breath of life, a spark of healing that comes to support our own healing processes. And so we're filled with a warm, soft cloud of healing, filled with light, floating in the sea like an embryo floating in the womb. We have a sense of rest, a sense of repose, a sense of health. Thank you very much. We've talked about a lot of different things today, about how the lymphatics work and what they look like in our bodies, and also how to access them to get them to function well in our bodies for health. And I just thought I'd give you a little summary here on this slide of the different exercises that we did, so you can have that to remind you. Enjoy. Thank you.